All right, everybody, welcome to the Middle Ground, Mike. We don't take sides. We're all about the truth. No left, no right, forward. We've got a good friend of the show here, Ron B. Ron, I really appreciate you coming back on.
Joe, it's a
You know,
pleasure.
our last episode, it did really really well, and people enjoyed it. And I got a lot of feedback on from people sending messages through Buzzsprout, and they
Awesome.
they really liked it. Um, we talked last time a lot, obviously a lot about the Ukraine Russia war.
hmm
Something I kind of want to talk to you is my stance has kind of been, hey, keep our nose out, right, and let's try to let it play out. And I really appreciate that the president did try to do that. But now I don't know about you, but I seem to have noticed a shift to where President Trump now is going a little bit more towards, all right, now we're going to arm Ukraine because now he gave Putin the opportunity to try to come to the table. Putin thumbed his nose at him in so many ways, and
Yeah,
not, it's turning around.
I think the president gave him a chance to come to the peace table, and Putin decided just to take whatever he was given and drive it further into Ukraine.
Yeah,
In other words, thank you very much, Mr. President. You seem to understand that I'm right, and so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. So he, when they met in Alaska, some called it the Moose Summit, the Moose Appeasement Summit, the Moose Munich, if you will. But at the same time, I think Trump was looking to find a way to end a terrible war. Well, if we were going to look at other conflicts where we tried to do something like that, I would think World War One would be a comparison because Woodrow Wilson tried to, end war after the First World War by creating the League of Nations and that sort of thing. And when he came into World War One in 1917, it had already been going for 3 years. We lost 100,000 troops in that war. He asked the British and the French to do something they were unwilling to do, and that would be not to punish Germany too harshly, or else they might come back and do it again. And if you've lost a generation in a war of the trenches with Germans, you're going to make them pay, and they did make them pay reparations, but those reparations also created hyperinflation in Germany, which allowed another dictator to come to power and blame the Treaty of Versailles, right? So in a way, Wilson was before his time in asking for peace, so that there wouldn't be another war. But the other parties didn't agree to it, did they? And I'm seeing the same sort of thing happening with Putin and Ukraine, but now we have Europe backing Ukraine, and the United States, as part of NATO, has to back Ukraine now too.
yeah. I still stand by the Kevin O'Leary approach to really kind of ending the Ukraine war, and that's to go to China, say 400% tariffs slapped on everything coming out of your country. And two things are going to happen. You're going to lower your tariffs and you're going to tell Russia they got to stop because in reality, China and India are propping up Russia by
Yeah,
buying their oil.
it,
And
yeah. The only problem with that is they don't understand Russia, and Putin. If you've studied Russia like I have, I've gone there and worked for the Freedom Support Act in 2 summers, and met with Russians and read Russian history and worked with Russian diplomats. The Russian point of view is they don't like to be encircled, and they have their own rights, and they have to, and they see Ukraine as part of Russia. Next question.
I mean, that's
Anything else I can tell you? The Ukraine, the Kievan Rus was there for 600 years, and the Rus part of that became Russia. And Russian Orthodox Church was founded in Kiev. So doesn't that make it Russian?
right in their
Well,
view. Yeah.
in their view, but not in the Ukrainian view, because the Russians were big ass bullies, and came in and told them what to do. And Stalin did more than that, starved them. during the 1930s to force them to become uh, communist farmers, and there, 3 to 5 million people were starved to death. So that's there were people that still remembered that from that period of time when the Russians came in again in 2014 and took Crimea without too much problem, I might add, and then declared it Russian. And then, well, since there wasn't much pushback on all the troops that were being deployed around Ukraine, they went in 2022, a couple days after my birthday. I remember because I was on the news the whole time, so I didn't get to celebrate my birthday that year, but that's fine. Uh, uh, there are much more important things. In fact, another year, you don't want to celebrate that at a certain point. And you certainly didn't want to celebrate the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is the second time they'd done it in a decade. And this time, it's now become a war of attrition, where there are 2 to 3 thousand people dying a week, and that's both Ukrainians and Russians. And it doesn't show any signs of letting up, frankly. So I don't think there's much that China at this point can say to Putin that it's not in his interest to do something when he's already spent money, blood. Russian pride is probably the most important thing here. That they see this as a vital interest, not a peripheral interest, but a vital interest that Ukraine not be a NATO country and there not be Nutella along the border, the 1,200-mile border with Russia, because it is a Russian interest that Ukraine remain somehow connected to, if not part of Russia. Hard to get beyond that when you're talking to a Russian. At some point, before the war started, there was a chance that they could negotiate it like they did with Austria in 1955. The Soviets were in Austria until 1955, by the way, but they agreed to go neutral, and so the Russians left. And Austrians are still neutral to this day, but they also have connections to NATO and are connected to the European Union. But that got the Soviets out. You could do something like that with Ukraine, but now that there have been so many casualties, both sides are dug in to a point where they're not going to want to give up territory, and the Soviets are not going to want to go home, especially from the Russian-speaking areas. One that's been incorporated into Russia, where their fleet is in Crimea, and in Donbass, where the Russian speakers asked them to come in and help them when the war started in 4 years ago. And as soon as I heard that, that's when I predicted it would be 24 hours before the Russians came in, and that was correct. They did come in within 24 hours. So the problem has gone on for too long. There have been too many casualties. Now both sides are dug in, and so it's going to remain a war of attrition that is going to be a point of contention between NATO and Putin and the United States for, I say, years to come. Putin's not ready to give up, and Zelensky isn't ready to give up territory.
You know, he what what does it look like post Putin? Like, will Russia continue that same stance, or do you think that that is
Yeah,
a
it's
post Putin Russia?
well, there are other people around him that think the same way. The military thinks the same way. And he has been, well, he's been voted into office, if you call it a vote. He gets rid of all his he gets rid of all of his opponents before they could even get to the ballot. And whether they're overseas or at home, he's guaranteed that he'll be in charge through 2036 at this point. And if he lives that long. He's 70 years old, but and the only thing he really has to worry about is catching a cold. He doesn't have to worry about midterm elections.
Like, I get Ukraine's position on Crimea, right? But to me, it's like, okay, it's already essentially been annexed without officially being called that it's been annexed by the rest of the world. Can we use this as a starting point to go, okay, the Ukrainians pretty much don't have any say in there anymore, anyways. They haven't for what, 10
Mhm.
years now. Do
Well,
we just
for
go, okay,
much longer than that, I might add. The Russian fleet has been there for a very long time in Sebastopol.
yeah, I mean, would that be a good way to
And
kind of get like a peace
well,
process started?
it's their only warm water port now because the one they had in Syria was their second one, and that one's gone. So Crimea's they're not going to give it up, and to to yeah, I think you could use that as a bargaining chip. Okay, you got Crimea, but we have to have some rules where we can go back and forth and share water and all that kind of stuff. But the real issue is eastern Ukraine, that the Donbass region in particular, Lugansk and Donetsk are that's where they're fighting now. It's the Russians are making progress incrementally at great cost to both sides, and that goes on every day, and we don't realize it. But the Russians are sending drones into Kiev. The Ukrainians are attacking Russian depots, fuel depots within Russia. So it's not getting better, and it's going to require a lot more investment in military personnel as well as materiel in order to keep defending Ukraine. And that's why I understand the urge to, can we just sit down and figure out a way to end this? But both sides are so dug in at this moment that it's hard to predict how this could happen. You mentioned perhaps, you know, Putin does get a cold, or somebody gives him a cold, or gives him a bullet, and in another case, some people have suggested would be a good idea. Well, he's figured out a way to protect himself very clearly. He has people eat his food, and he doesn't show up one place too often, and he doesn't have a fit schedule. He knows that there are those out there, especially Ukrainians at this point, that would like to get him off the political stage, but he's likely to be there because he's got a security apparatus he's had now for 25 years. He's been in power 25
Wow,
years.
has it really been that long? Man,
25 years, since 2000. That's when he got in
wow.
power.
I didn't
So
even
so he's been in it for the long game, and think of how many presidents there've been, let alone presidents of Ukraine in that time period. He looks at Western politicians as temporary flies on his windowsill that he can swat very easily, or at least wait until they died, until the next one comes in the next midterm election.
I mean, he's not wrong in that aspect.
He's not wrong, but he's in it for the long game, and we're often in it for the shorter game. But in this case, we have to be in it for the long game because we don't want Russia to overtake Ukraine, and we don't want this war to continue. That's the dilemma. That's the dilemma.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen, President Trump has gotten a lot. I don't know if you want to call it peace deals or at least like a truce per se with a lot of countries in the last several months.
Yes, he
You know,
has.
do and despite a lot of his faults, it seems to be one of his strengths that he can get people to go, okay, let's put the gun down and do business.
Well, he's a deal maker. He's transactional. He says can always be a deal made, except when it can't, and
I
that's
feel like
that
that's Russia.
that's Russia, Ukraine,
Yeah, I
and
just
it's also to another degree it's the Middle East, um, uh, but uh, but he's had some success there with the Abraham Accords as well as this recent peace plan. But I'm still, as I said on TV the other night, and he says, "Well, is this going to be peace in the Middle East?" And I said, "My heart is hopeful, but my head is real skeptical because this has happened before, where you have a glimmer of hope, and then something else blows up, and it's usually a terrorist attack."
Yeah, it's just gonna take somebody, flicking their nose the wrong way, and next thing you know, all chaos breaks out
Well,
there. It's such a
and
fragile part of the world.
the war in Gaza is going to create a whole nother, generation of terrorists that want to get back at Israel for attacking Gaza. So it is what it is, but it's a tragedy for, especially for the Palestinian people that I got to know over a 6-year period and worked with Fatah. Never worked with Hamas. We weren't allowed to, for good reason. And but it was clear that um, much more was going on than just Israel and the Palestinian people. You have Iran, you have the other Arab states involved, you have Europe involved. It's always been a very, very difficult place to create peace. It always has been step by step. And the first step was Egypt, then came Jordan, and then the Abraham Accords were a good step forward. That's what I see as hopeful. But we still have Iran. We still have the proxies that have not agreed to recognize Israel's right to exist, and that includes Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And shall I mention Iran? Hasn't mentioned that either. And they're the ones pulling the strings. And you think after this last conflict with Israel that they just want to lay down their arms and say, "Yeah, let's be brothers." I don't
Oh yeah,
think
no,
so.
no, not at all.
I don't think so.
Mm.
And well, we can hope for a Trump land in Gaza with rides and real estate. It's got to be first and foremost the Palestinians and the Israelis that come to an agreement on peace, because without that and without those around it, namely the proxies of Iran, uh, uh, there will continue to be war in the Middle East as long as it's in that situation. Hate to be a Debbie Downer on that, but I think there needs to be a little uh, reality injected into
Yeah,
the equation from time to time. There are things that become hopeful. Treaties do happen, and peace treaties have happened. Abraham Accords, great idea. But you still have those who don't want to see that happen, and that's why I think the Gaza war started in the first place. They didn't. Iran didn't want to see uh, Saudi Arabia and Israel sign an accord, which we were getting very close to doing.
yeah, they were, and I remember, and this is one area where, and I don't know, like obviously the behind the scenes, but I remember Saudi Arabia becoming disillusioned with the Biden administration. I don't know their exact reasons behind it, but to the point where Saudi Arabia and Iran were starting to do some sort of joint military exercises to a degree. And
Yeah, yeah,
and that I thought that I was like, I told my wife, I'm like, these two countries hate each other, and
yeah.
the fact
They
that they're willing to stand next to each other and shoot guns is it's not a good sign for us.
Well, it it unraveled pretty quickly.
Yeah.
There's still a you know the ever since the Iran-Iraq war, 8 years between Sunnis and Shia, there's still a Sunni-Shia divide that is pretty immense. Uh, and let's just say that may have you don't need to lose sleep over that alliance any longer. I don't think.
No, no, it's just at the time, and I don't necessarily blame the president himself. It was just like how they did things, kind of
Yeah,
pushed them into each other's arms, almost per se. And it was just like I felt that if it would have went too far, it would have been problematic for
yeah,
us.
yeah.
But Saudi Arabia seems to really like Donald Trump. Like they really seem to embrace him.
Well,
especially the crown prince.
they agreed to invest a lot of money in our AI centers as well as buy airplanes from us, which also helps our economy. And I think that uh, that's fine. That's fine and good. And if you have an economic relationship with a country, that normally moderates your relations with them. It did with China for a long time, and we don't have an economic relationship with Russia, be, and so it doesn't moderate our behavior with them. It moderated the European behavior because they bought oil and gas from them until recently. And in fact, Hungary still buys 60% of its oil and gas from Russia. And so that's a problem because they're in the European Union, they're in NATO, and there's an issue about asking folks not to buy Russian oil at the moment, and Hungary's at the forefront of that problem.
I mean, well, we got a lot of oil in Canada. I'm sure they would love to sell it.
Yeah, we have a lot here too. So, and especially natural gas. We're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. The other place that has an awful lot of oil and gas happens to be in South America, a country by the name of Venezuela, which is now also in
Yes.
the news for other reasons. Um, the Trump administration has declared the cartels, 6 cartels, well, actually more than 6, but 6 Mexican cartels. I think there were 12 cartels in total in South America as terrorist organizations, and that puts them in on the same footing as ISIS. And in fact, the president has said that the cartels are the ISIS of Latin America, and that Maduro, having gone through 2 elections that where he did not get elected but still remained in power, uh, is now involved in the drug trade and is going to be tried as a narco terrorist. In fact, has been indicted in New York as a narco terrorist, and the Department of Justice has raised a reward, if you will, of to $50 million for information that leads to the arrests of Nicolas Maduro as a narco trafficker. You may have noticed that there have been a lot of military buildup in the Caribbean, and
Yes.
not just the Caribbean. What just went through the Straits of Gibraltar yesterday was a carrier strike group, and that was the USS Ford, which is the most modern $13 billion aircraft carrier that carries anywhere from 75 to 130 airplanes,
Oh, geez.
F-18s, F-18s, Seahawk helicopters, EC-2 Hawkeyes that are reconnaissance air. There are 4,500 people on that ship alone. You don't just get an aircraft carrier when you get a strike group. You get 3 destroyers, you get 2 cruisers, you may or may not get a submarine, but which you usually do. An attack submarine, in this case, a Virginia class submarine, the latest. So that much firepower coming into the Caribbean is the most firepower we've had there, maybe ever. There's more firepower in that carrier strike group than many nations have in their entire military. So that going off the coast of, shall we say, Venezuela is going to send a message. And there has been a campaign of pressure on Maduro to step down, which he won't. And we've seen B-1s fly from Texas to buzz Venezuela. We've seen B-52s from Florida buzz Venezuela. We've had if you haven't noticed that they've renovated a base in Puerto Rico that was called the Roosevelt Roads, that now has its satellite photos show that there are F-35s based there, and there's also The FAA has a couple of days ago, uh, restricted airspace over Puerto Rico for the next 6 months. That only DoD aircraft can fly over in a particular area, which means that they're getting ready for some sort of operations. At least that's the signal it sends to me. All of these things point to something going on in not just the Caribbean, but against drug cartels in general. They have sunk 14 ships thus far, and that's a a controversy in and of itself, because if you were to capture those boats and then show the world that it had cocaine on it, and then arrest these people, that's different than just blowing them out of the water. And they were in international waters, but they more than likely were drug boats. But the way you do it, and I'm certain that they verified that they were drug boats before they blew them up. Um, and they may just be that they don't care about it any longer, but the U.S. Congress cares about it, and they weren't informed of this new approach, and what the strategy is, and what the future strategy is, until a few weeks ago, and it had been planned for months.
Well, we're talking about that, like that part with Venezuela. Let me pull my little note up here on that.
Sure.
Do. I don't know how I got lost. There we go. So, yeah, like you were talking about how he has lost 2 elections, hasn't, really left power like he should have.
Right.
Do you think that the United States has any plans of taking significant action to change it?
Well, one would argue that sending all this military power into the region and buzzing the coast, suggesting that he stepped down, and the president suggesting publicly that Maduro will not be in power much longer, tells me that something's in the works.
Yeah, that's how I took it as well. I
Yeah.
definitely do you think that we'll have, I don't know if you want to say it, global support on something like this?
Well, you'll get the usual, those who support and those who do not, lining up depending on their alliances and the like. Uh, and
Naturally.
so Russia's already said, well, we'll send some missiles to protect you. That's more talk than anything else, because they've got their own problems that they're dealing with, and they don't they're not going to worry too much about Venezuela, other than the fact of saying something on the air, some sort of support. But I think folks will line up the way they always line up. There will be those in Latin America who dislike Maduro and see him as a threat to the region, and they'll support. There will be others who see this as a potential threat to them down the road, if there's going to be an intervention in one way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be an invasion, by the way. It could be limited strikes on ports and military facilities and drug production facilities. But nonetheless, it's clear that some activity has been mentioned about intelligence agents going in to try and disrupt what's going on in Venezuela, and Maduro has said that he's arrested some that intended to do so. But whether or not that's true, don't know. But if there is something going to happen militarily, uh, there is always some sort of intelligence gathering information, and folks on the ground doing things too. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's happening.
No, that's it to me, it seems kind of like the inevitable, right? It seems like it's inevitably gonna happen. I
Well,
remember, was it Hugo Chavez that nationalized their oil, if I'm correct?
well, Uncle Hugo, yes, Uncle Hugo nationalized their oil. In fact, Maduro was the vice president under Hugo Chavez, and also foreign minister. So
Wow.
he took over after Chavez uh, left, and has continued in the same traditions.
See, now that part I did not know that part. So that is definitely very, very interesting that he was, the vice president there. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
At the end,
how do you think, obviously, the great American question, right? When it comes to Venezuela and the Middle East, let's say we decide to enter Venezuela, any, of any significance, right? How do you think that's going to roil the markets, crude oil?
well, initially it'll probably increase the cost of oil whenever there's a conflict in an area where oil is present. That we know that from the Middle East, and especially if other supplies, if you're stopping supplies from Russia from getting bought, that means that it would Venezuela, if that oil comes off the market, then you're going to see an increase, or at least a temporary increase until they figure out what to do, uh, and what the outcome of any potential conflict would be there. It would be very important, be, because that either Venezuelan oil gets back into the global economy, or it stays within the authoritarian economy, and that's another issue. But I think, when you see questions like, is the United States interested in stopping drugs coming from Latin America to the United States, or are they interested in regime change? That's the big question. And I would say yes.
I think it's yes to both with Trump.
Yeah, I think it's yes to both with Trump. And this is being used as a way to get to Maduro.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Trump is he's, especially when it comes to drugs and things like that, he's never once that I know of ever really flipped the script on how he views it.
Right.
He's been pretty, and I think, it's a pretty straightforward approach. He's definitely softened his stance on marijuana over the years, as the public has said, hey, we're in support of it. He's kind of been like, I don't like it, but I'm not going to make it a point to come after it.
Yeah, but the
In
issue
here.
of fentanyl and
But yeah,
cocaine and crack
I,
and all of that is a different
I lost a brother to
issue.
fentanyl.
Yeah. Oh, you
You
did.
know,
I'm so sorry to hear that.
no, no, I appreciate that my brother, he smoked pot, and I don't know who he got it from. Obviously we'll probably never know, but they found in the system. The only thing they found was beer, marijuana, and fentanyl. They didn't find
Well,
anything else. And they said it was such a minuscule amount
yeah.
that it had to
Well,
have been something that he just got off of, whatever he was given. And it was like, man,
right.
it was, it was, that was probably the first time that ever, me personally, had to deal with the fentanyl crisis. You know what I mean? So it's,
Yeah, well, it
you know,
does become personal if someone in your family dies from it, and unfortunately, so many families have had this experience that it's time we woke up to it. And here in San Diego, where I live, it's a huge issue too. Lots of people have died, and lots of young people have died, unknowing that that whatever they were buying was laced with this stuff. And it could be the marijuana, could be the pills, could be any number of forms. And so it's clear that drugs are killing Americans, and that this is being used, and some agree with it, some do not, as a way to go after drug dealers, as well as countries that are embedded in the drug trafficking business. And now Maduro has gotten in this administration's sights. They were recognized as the illegitimate government by the Biden administration during the last election in 2019. That's consistent. We don't recognize Maduro as a legitimate government, and there should be another government there. But what's different is we're really now to associate him as a narco terrorism, which allows for more action to be taken on a military front. than was before.
Yeah, yeah. It's well, I don't want to say like pretty easy because that's definitely not the way I'm trying to say it. It's
Yeah.
been pretty the opposition of Venezuela, especially when our country has got I don't know my whole life I can think of we have not been really allies with the since Hugo Chavez. I don't really know too much about it beforehand.
Beforehand, it was okay. Before that, it was okay. We did a lot of uh, oil business. Citgo was, Venezuelan oil, and what have you. But we haven't had much of a relationship because they've been associated with Iran and with China and with Russia and Cuba, and so they've fallen into the communist camp since Hugo Chavez, and that's number one. And then number two, with others providing arms to Venezuela, including Iran, Russia, and China, that you can invoke the Monroe Doctrine and say, "Hey, wait a minute, you guys shouldn't be messing around in our backyard." So that would have been used during a different era, but it could still be used today. And the real issue is that drugs are killing Americans, and so this is going to be used as a justification, and rightly so in some circles, to to go after those that are trafficking drugs, and that includes countries that allow it to happen.
Yeah, no. Do you think Mexico will end up getting involved in this?
Oh, Mexico's involved in this already because the Sinaloa cartel works with the Cartel de las Solas, which is the Venezuelan cartel that ships over 500 tons of cocaine to the United States and Europe every year. So they work together.
Okay, now that part, wow, I did not realize. I knew that they had links, but I guess I didn't realize it was like that. I mean, you've seen on pretty much anywhere if you pick up any kind of news that our government has been I want to say attacking, right, but bombing what they call cartel boats, however you'd like to
Yeah,
word it.
they're speedboats with drugs on them, and well, this is not the first time this has happened. I might add, in the 1980s, there was an international war on drugs that the Reagan administration also participated in, and there were military assets that were used to go after drug cartels and boats even. Uh, so it's not new, but it's you know uh, it was a little different. It was a little different then, and Trump is being much more cagey about it in his second term about it. He's not showing his cards to the Senate as he's supposed to inform the Senate about what he's doing. And they just recently heard about the legal justification for attacking drug boats in international waters, and only within the last few weeks. So it's he's taken a different approach this time, but he's being very clear that, and all the signals say to me that if you're going to send all of this military power down there, that uh, in order to save face, either Maduro has to step down or you got to do something. And so that says to me that something is likely to happen.
Yeah, I mean it just seems like an inevitable thing that's going to happen at some point. Um, is any of this I haven't seen any, right? But I know like during the Soviet era, they sent a lot of money to Central America. Is Russia linked to any of this?
Well, Russia used to be, and the Soviet Union used to be, and in fact, but when the Soviet Union broke up, they were subsidizing Cuba to the tune of $1 million a day, at least that equivalent, during the Cold War. But when the Soviet Union ended because they were broke and didn't have any hard currency, and it's taken them a while to build it back up with their oil and gas reserves. They are subsidizing um, like-minded countries, including Cuba uh, and Venezuela again, but the but certainly not at the Cold War levels because they have this very expensive war in Ukraine plus sanctions on their oil and gas business for anybody that does business with them. So it's really, they can't afford to support Venezuela along the lines that Venezuela would like to be supported. And I might add that, 56% of Venezuelans can't afford to buy food. In 2017, every Venezuela lost 24 pounds on average because there were food shortages. And they
Wow.
were on what was locally called the Maduro diet. And the Maduro diet was there was no food in the stores, and so you had to go on a diet. Uh, and so the Venezuelans over over relied on oil and gas economy and didn't diversify their economy as any smart capitalist economy usually does to make sure that there's enough foodstuffs for the people uh, uh, as well as enough airplanes for defense. And they didn't invest in anything else. And when oil prices went down, and that that crushed their economy, inflation went up, and folks started leaving. There are about 8 million Venezuelans have left a 38 million in a country of 38 million, and those that are there are in bad shape. So, with a government that is not recognized by 60 other countries in the world.
I didn't realize it was that many.
60. Yeah.
Wow. I knew, yeah, wow. That's quite a quite a bit
Yeah.
of countries not to recognize you when you're a major, well, at one point you were a major player in oil, I should say.
Right. Right.
You know, I know that, with Russia, Ukraine, you've got, obviously our government's been shut down here for what, over a month now.
Yeah.
Uh
It's so been a long time, the longest ever.
yeah, like how does, I mean, obviously this is the longest ever, right? But through your experience, how does something like that impact, these types of situations, the Russia, the Venezuelas of the, with what's going on there?
Well, it certainly does because if people are furloughed in the foreign policy or national defense area, that means you're having to rely on people going to work and not getting paid. The military gets paid, but certain others don't. And the issue becomes where do things fall between the cracks? And between you and me, and everybody listening, I don't think a superpower should ever shut down. And
No,
I
me
think
neither.
and I think that this is what the 18th time the government has shut down the last 20 years. And this goes right to why you exist, the middle ground, Mike. That is, can't you make a deal to
Right.
get a budget? And isn't that your job, Congress, to get a budget? And if you can't get a deal, you shouldn't be paid. And in fact, you know, for every day that they don't um, agree to a budget, they should stop paying all congressional staff. See how that
Yeah.
see how long it takes for them to get the job done, right? Or they should stop paying into the IRAs of all congressmen, or stop paying congressmen. Just don't pay them.
Yeah, I wouldn't
And
be, I don't think most Americans would be opposed to that. They'd probably be all for it. It should be
I've
a
heard that.
constitutional amendment.
Well, it should be, and there were, laws, some legislation that was passed at one point to that extent, but I think it's no longer in place. But for God's sake, do your job and get it done. It's embarrassing as a superpower that you can't even agree to pay your own people that are that are air traffic controllers.
But yeah,
Give me a
I've seen, I got one of my locations is by the airport, and we've we started to see some impact from that.
Yeah. Well, and what the Trump administration has been doing is systematically firing bureaucrats, and many bureaucrats are Democrats, and so it's like, well, this is just gives me another way to reduce government spending, which in turn creates the spiral on the other side, saying, well, you can't reduce government spending because that's our forte on the Democratic side.
Right.
So
I use Michigan as a really good example. I mean, obviously,
yeah, it would be a good example.
the government technically, I think technically it got shut down for a hot second, but they got record investment in this state into K through 12 education, right? They got Republicans and Democrats to come to the table on that. At
Hmm.
the federal level, that would just never happen. Like
No,
it would just be taboo. But here they went, okay, I didn't agree with them raising the gas tax. I get why they did. To me, I would have not been okay with that. But they got a majority of the money that they're getting for the roads on top of it from the marijuana tax here.
yeah,
And where I'm okay with that is I'm sure this, a lot of younger people don't, is they used to call them sin taxes, right?
right.
I'm okay with the sin tax because you make a choice to buy that. You don't have to have it to live. You
That's
don't have
right.
to have it to put food in. So, hey, you want to raise sin taxes? Go for it all you want. Do whatever you feel you need to do. But they did that. They got special needs funded in the state. They got obviously the K through 12. If I believe you have to have like a
Are you
3.0
telling me that?
GPA.
Are you telling me that they compromised?
Yeah,
In
I
other words,
mean,
you mean they met somewhere in the middle? Oh my
yeah,
god! Oh my god!
right.
What a concept!
Right, and they did it here, yeah, there's a little bit of mudslinging, but you could tell that it was more political posturing than it
Yeah,
was hate. Like, to me, at least I think that I can tell the difference between when a politician's trying to be vile about something or they're just
yeah,
posturing.
yeah, yeah.
And in certain ones, they posture, they'll say, "Well, it's the Democrats, but if they give me a call later this evening, we'll talk about it."
Yeah, well,
That's
that's the way
posturing.
it used to work, and I was a youngin in my 20s when I worked in the Pentagon for the Reagan administration, but everybody knew that at the end of the day he would go over to the Irish Times and have a beer with Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, Democratic Speaker of the House, and they'd get deals done there.
Yeah, and that's
They'd
how it should
compromise,
be.
yeah, and you know they may say something publicly about you're this and that, but never got in the way of them getting a couple of things done that required compromise. And I just don't see that spirit alive, if alive at all, in the current Congress.
No, and I've really advocated towards more of on a lot of issues, a state control, because the states still have to, with the exception of no pun intended where you live, most states have to balance their budget. They have to,
Mhm.
it's part, I don't know how California works, but I know the vast majority do, especially here in Michigan.
Well,
They can't operate unless they
we
balance
used
it.
to. Now we're in a huge deficit. But we used to
Yeah,
balance it.
Michigan, ever since Rick Snyder here, the Michigan has done a pretty good job of managing its money.
Hmm.
And I mean, heck, you can buy in the city I live in, you can buy a 3, 4 bedroom house, 2 car garage with a basement, old ranch style home for probably anywhere from 150 to 180, 200,000.
Now,
And yeah, now like in today's market, there's one a couple doors down from me for sale for 210,000, I think it is.
hey,
It's a 4 bedroom house.
I have to become a Tigers fan.
Yeah, and it's and I attribute that, obviously, they had the auto crash, but I attribute that to Michigan being a very balanced approach to everything, right? Because Michigan is I forgot what somebody said. Michigan's a purple state.
Hmm.
Depending on the issue, Michigan flips red or blue. And it's not even just in general. It literally comes here down to the issue itself,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
people tend to, the UAW endorsed Biden, but if you
yeah.
drove around, like I live in Automotiveville, right? Almost
Right.
probably half the people around me, they all had Trump signs on their lawn.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
UAW leadership did not match their membership in terms of who they were going for in this election. It was
Well, and that's
complete opposite.
and that came out the other end, didn't it?
Yeah,
And
it was very surprising. You would have not guessed it, but a lot of people here they felt the tariffs do hurt to a point, but people here they seen what happened when we had pretty much open trade with China and to a degree, right?
yeah,
It gutted everything, so they're kind of like, well, yeah, we got to do something about it because everybody else has just paid us a lip service,
right.
and he's the one that's crazy enough to do it.
And he pinpointed the automobile industry, which is huge for Detroit, huge for Michigan. So that the tariffs were linked to automobiles was very clear for everyone to see.
Oh yeah, big time. Well, let's jump over to something we were talking about Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
What a tragedy that was.
Yeah, it was a tragedy. I got called from a local ABC News station to go on when he was shot, and he was still alive when I went on. And I said what I might have even sent you a link to it, but
Yes.
the what I said was it's a tragedy, no matter his point of view, no matter if you're liberal or conservative or some purple mix of the two, that you should allow all points of view to be out there. And just because he believed in the Constitution, was a conservative voice, very conservative voice, no question about it, that supported gun ownership and was against abortion and all of that. That's his right to have that point of view, and under the First Amendment, which and he endorsed a constitutional debate based on the Constitution itself, and it's hard to argue against that in this time when people aren't even looking at the Constitution and realizing what's in it. So you don't attack the person, you attack a policy. You don't do ad hominem, you know, character assassinations followed by a real assassination. You do a debate over the policies and you dissect the policies, not the person. He was dissected that day by a bullet. That should never happen again. And didn't matter if he supported gun ownership or what have you. Some people, you know, said it was ironic that he supported gun ownership and that's what got him killed. That's the wrong way to think about it. The right way to think about it is allow everybody to say what they want, as long as it doesn't encourage political violence. And he
Yeah,
did
no,
not
no doubt.
he did not encourage political violence, but he died as a result of it.
Yeah, he's as a human being, he's probably one of the most pure people that you can meet in terms of he really was who he was. There wasn't the Charlie Kirk that was on campus and then the Charlie Kirk that was, behind the curtain per se.
Yeah.
That's the one thing a lot of people say, he was authentic to who he portrayed himself to be. And, I believe if I'm right, I believe his wife and one of his daughters were there. And that was, man, I could only imagine. Right when not long after it happened, I pulled it up on CNN and my wife was watching it too. And it was tragic. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a guy who generally, has very much emotion, but it brought a couple tears in my eye. I'm sitting here,
Hmm.
I'm like, man, this is probably the first time where a political, maybe outside of like 9/11, where a political event like that, if you want to
Hmm.
call it assassination, really like, I guess it got to me because it was so raw. It wasn't like, okay, hey, this was like, you see the guy. It was almost to me like in terms of like the raw emotion of it
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
how it was
Well,
with JFK,
well,
because you've
well,
seen it.
well, it's a human thing. You think about their family. You think about his wife, his kids, no longer going to have him in the house, no longer being able to raise their family. And that to me is a tragedy, no matter what your point of view is, no matter where you come from, no matter if you're left or right. And that's if you have a human, if you have a sense of humanity, one piece of DNA within you that is a sense of humanity, you should feel for someone's family if something like that happens to the head of the family. And it was a tragedy, and it was also a warning. It was a warning that if I may say, uh, that the middle ground is where you should be, not on the extremes, because the extremes lead to this kind of behavior.
Yeah, yeah, and I some of his positions definitely would come off as extreme with how he would say some of them. But
Well,
he
yeah,
was
it's
never
true.
downright he was never downright sarcastic with people, but I never took anything he said as downright rude. He would always kind of let people, if they got to that point, he would be like, "Well, it's kind of on you. See you later," type of thing.
Right.
I I I watched a lot of him beforehand. I think what I really liked is just when I watched how he was able to engage people. And even and a lot of the times people who didn't agree with him and who were mean to him, if you want to call it that, they would sit there and have that conversation. But I never heard the vast majority of them ever be like, "Well, I don't like Charlie Kirk, so kill him," and then come to find out that the shooter or the murderer assassin, his family was diehard MAGA. This young man goes to college and somehow, people are, oh, he was radicalized. I'm like, I don't know if I would go there, but something about everything in that situation, the world going on, flipped this kid's switch to such a degree.
Yeah.
That is where, for me, that's where I'm like, we really need to invest some money into mental health because we're teaching kids how to think better, something of that nature. Something's that because these kids don't know how to process
Well,
emotion.
yeah. You're absolutely right about that. I think the if he had learned the idea that it's okay to disagree with somebody, just uh, take it to the ballot box, not to a gun cartridge. All right, vote for who you want, discuss for who you want, but don't kill who you dislike. I mean, that should be sort of basic moral principle that everybody gets when they grow up. But for some reason, we're not teaching that effectively enough in schools so that folks like this get it, or they're not interested enough in school to participate. And that's where you're talking about mental health issues. Anybody that chooses to shoot somebody has a mental health problem. I agree with you,
Yes.
and that needs to be the focus.
Yeah. I think teaching kids accountability and
Yeah,
responsibility, it
yeah,
should happen at home. But
yeah,
apparently, in some situations, and I'm not
yeah.
criticizing parents as a whole, but I'm a parent myself, but in certain situations, it can't be happening with things that are going on. Like, and I'm not knocking these parents for say not trying, but something is not right. So here in Michigan, I'm sure you remember the Oxford school
Yep.
shooting that
Oh
happened
yes, I
here.
remember that. Yeah.
The parents literally bought the ammo and the gun and put it into this kid's hand, and he had been in trouble several times at school for like violent like tendencies. I believe his mom was there the day before or the day of, where he had been using the school computer to search hollow point bullets. And
Yeah.
and I'm going, this is these were like its responsibility and accountability is just completely gone in some situations.
Yeah, it is, and that's 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 a challenge. That's a challenge for security forces around big events like Charlie Kirk's. And from now on, I'm afraid that any large events for Turning Point or anything like that is going to require a lot more security preparation. But I also note that Turning Point just exploded in terms of its numbers after Charlie
Oh, yeah.
Kirk's death in as a way of saying, "Hey, you can't do this." In fact, there are many more of us that will step into his shoes because of what he what he believed in, and we believe in it too. So it was really counterproductive to take this action against him in terms of you just created more support for him.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if you really hated the guy, this was the worst way to uh, get after his movement because you really regenerated it and in fact put more turning point organizations on high schools and universities than had existed before.
God, I think they only had 100 and something or a couple hundred, whatever it was, and I think they have applications like 30 to 50,000 worldwide now
Yeah.
for chapters. And and the one thing that I have noticed, and it seems to still have sustained itself, is there's been a religious revival in this country since then. People have,
Hmm.
well, like it's kind of like when obviously I wasn't alive, but when JFK was assassinated, I don't know if it like brought people like closer together, or it made people like reevaluate themselves,
Yeah,
but it's really pushed
I
people
was
there.
7 years old. I was 7 years old when that happened, and I had just met him the year before in Yosemite National Park. He had flown in via helicopter to visit the park, and my dad was in charge of entertainment in Yosemite. And so we knew the park rangers, so we knew where the helicopter was going to land. And so we went out there, and there I was with my Laura Scudder's potato chips, waiting for this guy in a helicopter to show up, and he's the president of the United States. And dang, if he doesn't walk right out right in front of me, I go, "Hiya, Perez." And he comes over and shakes my hand before he goes over to the Lincoln, to the, uh, open air Lincoln. He was going to drive to the Awani Hotel. And my mother gets mad at me and says, "It's Mr. President, not Prez," and that gets picked up by the Fresno Bee. But that's the newspaper. Our last name's B. So that made it fun for them to say, well, little Ronnie B got told to call him Mr. President. And then 50 years later, I get a call from the Fresno Bee saying, was that you? I said, yeah, that was me. So I met him. And so that next year, and I guess it was fourth grade, I don't remember. No, second grade. Um, we got something over the intercom. It said, "This is the principal. The president of the United States has been shot, so pray for him." And I'm not sure you would get that over the intercom these days at a public school. And so that's what we heard. And then all the little boys in the class said, "Well, we'll find the guy and you know cut his arm and put salt in his wounds. Whoever did it, we got to go beat him up. Whoever did it, it was just like little kids trying to figure out what was going on with it." But I remember that day very particularly, and I remember my mother crying when I came home, and
Yeah,
and said, "Mom, what's wrong? Something wrong?" She says, "Well, the president's been shot." Oh, I didn't know you knew him so well, But the fact of the matter was that he was an important figure that who brought hope to a large portion of society, and to lose him in that way was so difficult for many people to understand because there have been other assassinations, of course, that came after that. Martin Luther King and his brother, Bobby Kennedy, in 1968 in Los Angeles. So the impact on the body politic's important, and I was somewhat surprised by the impact of the Kirk assassination, but it follows a pattern that you create martyrs out of those you kill. And in this case, they didn't kill him; they just killed the body that expressed his point of view, not the soul that continues on in the organization that continues to prosper.
yeah. I mean, he was. I think he. What was it? Yale did a poll recently, and Gen Z, 18 to 21,
Hmm.
is 12 points more conservative than I believe Gen Z. That's 22 to 28 or whatever it is.
That's
And
interesting.
They attributed a lot to the COVID slash the Biden years. A lot of things that were going on
Yeah,
during then, and and then you have the Charlie Kirk situation happening.
yeah,
I think that depending how things flow, you may see another Reagan style rise of conservatism, in that more of like a positive spin to it, rather than. And
right.
I'm not knocking MAGA per se, but MAGA is a lot more raw, and they're not
Hmm.
mincing any words. There's no politeness about it in that aspect. And
Right.
I got a lot of MAGA friends, but you know, Ronald Reagan was very tactful and he's very polite. Where obviously Trump is not. And I think
Yeah,
the
well,
Charlie Kirk
Reagan,
situation will
Reagan,
fuel it.
Reagan could be pretty direct too, but not like Trump. You're right. He had a little more diplomatic flair.
Yeah, and the one good thing I'll say definitely about between both of them is I truly believe they both care. Like about the country, about vastly different things,
Yeah,
than a lot of us,
yeah.
but you will be hard pressed to find a lot of people who care about their country as much as those two did, and the degrees that they are doing.
And I find it interesting that both had assassination attempts against them,
Yes.
and one was John Hinckley at the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. in 1980, I think it was, 81. And Reagan took away from that. I went to his library uh, up in Loma Linda. There is a whole section about the assassination attempt. And what he took away from that was that he thought that he needed, since he survived that he needed to be a peacemaker in his second term.
Wow.
And that led to him negotiating the intermediate nuclear force treaty with Gorbachev, which I was involved in, and very important treaty, which has since been negated by Putin and also the United States, because Putin uh, started testing intermediate nuclear forces again. But I find it interesting that this may have also affected President Trump in the same way, namely that he survived two assassination attempts, so he uh, wants will want to be remembered for trying to make peace in a variety of places, including in the places which most people think are impossible: Ukraine and Russia and the Middle East. Middle East is getting a little closer, but time will tell. But still, in other places, he has created peace where he could, and I think that may have come from these assassination attempts, where they were spared and they figured they're here for another purpose that must mean use their power for good somehow. And I'm hoping that's the case, and I know it was the case with Reagan, and I suggest it might be with Trump.
I encourage people to read the Ronald Reagan Diaries. I read that
Mm.
book,
Yeah.
and you learn a lot about not just necessarily the president, but you learn a lot about who he was
Hmm.
and what went through his mind and what was in his heart.
Yeah.
And I gained a whole new level of respect for him after I read those. Like the how distraught he was over Challenger,
Oh yeah.
the explosion. Like
Yeah.
I believe in the book, he was obviously older, but he didn't sleep for like 2 days.
Yeah.
I'm a younger man than he was. In 2 days, me not sleeping, I'm gonna be delirious. Like I probably won't even know what year it is at by that point.
You're right.
Yeah. And
Um,
but then you look at President Trump, and I forgot who it was. Somebody, they were like, yeah, I had been saying something, and the president, he texted me at 1 o'clock in the morning and asked me what I thought about this policy, and then he was on TV at 6:30 in the morning doing a press conference. And does this man ever sleep? And one thing I've heard about Donald Trump is he only sleeps 4 to 5 hours a day max.
well, if you've studied the presidency as I have during crises and things of that nature, remember, as commander in chief, uh, he's the CEO of the economy. He's in charge of the budget. He's in the requirements of president are enormous. Every morning at 7:15, he gets a presidential daily briefing, which is this thick and it's top secret. I've seen them from different administrations. Each page says, here's another threat to the United States. What do you want to do about it? Do you want to study it, or do you want to give it to somebody else to do something about it? And you have to sign every page that you've seen it. All right. And that's 55 to 155 pages of threats against the United States that you have to do over breakfast every morning.
Jeez.
Um,
Woo.
we don't realize the pressure that there is on every president in this office. And you see the photos, the before and after photos, of
Yeah.
of baby George Bush and baby Barack Obama, and then 4 years later they look like they've aged 30 years. There's a reason for that, and that is because of those presidential daily briefs. That half the stuff that they do we can't even know about. We can't
Right.
even know about.
Yeah, Barack Obama, I think he was probably the difference from when he got elected to when he left office
Yeah,
was probably one of the biggest transformations I had seen. I mean, he really looked like it hit him hard.
right.
Like, more so than Bill Clinton a little bit, but it really hit Obama to the core.
Yeah, well, and it does most presidents actually, and it's because of the pressures that they have to go through on a daily basis, and the decisions they have to make on a daily basis. Not just let's think about it or study it or look backward and call it history, but they have to make decisions on a daily basis that are going to affect people's lives, and you can't be right on all of them, and but you have to make them. And so it's a job I don't think most people understand uh, how complex it is and how trying it is. But at the same time, everybody thinks of it as this glorified position that you really have to have a humongous ego to want to ever do it in the first place, because look what you put your families through, let alone yourself. In order to do something you don't really need to do if you're President Trump. He's a millionaire many times over. He gives his salary away every month to one part of the government or a charity. And so did Kennedy, by the way. Kennedy did that too. There are
Oh, that
only
part I did not know.
Yeah, Kennedy did that too. There are only two or three that did, but those he was one that did. And so they're doing it for another reason. And I don't think it's just ego. You have to love the country in order to give give part of your well-being to the country, and you certainly do that if you're president of the United States over a 4 or an 8-year period.
No, I mean, it's what was it? God, what was that famous? I don't know why I'm just drawing a blank on it. Whatever that person was, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years ago that used to say, well, if you use this cream or whatever, you can end the aging process slowly but surely.
Oh, they
It
do.
was
They
kind of
have them
like,
today too. They have
yeah,
them out there today too.
it was
Yeah,
it was one of those big infomercials. I
yeah,
can't remember which one. There's always been so many of them over the years.
yeah.
I mean, good grief. I'm gonna start myself an infomercial here soon. I'm just kidding.
Well, the middle ground face cream, we'll call it.
Yeah. It won't
Yeah,
it
make
won't make
yourself
you young,
younger.
but
Make yourself younger, and don't go to the extremes.
hey, there you go. There you go. That would probably sell you.
Yeah.
Maybe get a Billy Mazer recording for you, but wait, there's more. Yeah,
Why not?
I seen a picture on Facebook. People still go to that man's grave and leave him flowers, and people are still very, very emotionally attached to his
Yeah.
way of selling things.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
he was an American icon and didn't even realize it.
well, it's funny how people do get attached. It can be people like that, can be politicians, it can be rock stars. If you
Yeah.
go to graves in Paris, you see Jim Morrison's grave, and there's all sorts of flowers left there, and albums stuck in the ground with signatures, and you name it. It's people. They do. idolize people in the public light, whether they be selling something, singing something, or projecting something as a politician.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't really deny that.
Right.
uh, you know, uh, Ron, I really appreciate you coming on today. We
Sure.
we definitely covered a lot, especially with the Venezuela. I did not
I think
realize that
I
he was
I
the
think that was
vice president.
important. I think it's important because it's coming up,
But
and
yeah,
we gotta watch it carefully because, it's, serious business.
it is, and folks, I normally I'm pretty concrete and on where I'm at in the middle area, but the Venezuela one, I have not really formed a concrete. Yeah, that guy's got to go. He lost an election twice. You got to go, but outside of that, I'm very in murky waters about it, right? Because sovereignty of the nation, but at the same time, the drug
Well,
cartels
this will
and
give you more of an opportunity to learn about it, and you can, go to the Congressional Research Service. Their reports are balanced. That's where I used to work, and we had to put out all schools of thought in all of our reports. That's why I suggest to my students that they use it for their research papers, and it would be a useful thing to look at for your viewers too. They're all online. You just type in Venezuela, U.S. Venezuelan relations, and you'll see a series of reports, and you get the latest one. I think was this month that came out on U.S. Venezuelan relations, and so that'll give you the background and context you need to know on how we got here before anything happens.
yeah, I just pulled that up now that you said that. I literally so now I'm gonna
Do you
make
see
sure
it?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I definitely see it. It's Venezuela right there, September 30th.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'll
So
definitely be analyzing that.
yeah, and
That
and you, I used to write these things, so I know, and 30 people review it before it gets published, and every word gets looked at. So I know that they're done very carefully, and they have to be balanced. They have to reflect no bias and reflect all schools of thought. When someone would call us and say, write me a speech, it was called directed writing. We had to stamp directed writing on every page because they were telling us what to say.
wow. Now that part I did not know.
Yeah, well, most people wouldn't.
Wow. Well, Ron, I'm sure there's going to be some things developing here real soon, and we'll have to get you back on here, especially with Venezuela. And I really hope for the world's sake that Ukraine can at least somehow wind down to some degree, or
Don't we all?
at least hit a stalemate where they stop shooting. Like get to a stalemate.
That's the problem. They can't get there, and this is a war of attrition. And a war of attrition, it favors Russia, unfortunately, because they've got a lot more people than Ukraine, but Ukraine has a lot more money behind them from NATO and the United States, and so that's why it continues to move forward.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And everybody, check out Ron. What's your website again? I'm drawing a blank in my head.
Well, we've got learnthroughtravel.com that talks about my program at Oxford. I'm on Facebook as Ronald B, and I'm also on X as at Ron JB.
Yeah, check his stuff out. I mean, Ron puts out a lot of good stuff too. I mean, I know I crank content out like there's an army of people behind me doing it.
Mm.
I try to anyways. But everybody check out the websites, check out Ron's stuff. In the description of this post, his websites will be on there. And again, Ron, thanks for coming. Remember, everybody, no left, no right, forward. Let's all look ahead and be peaceful towards each other. And remember, we all occupy the same land.
What he said.
All right, have a good day, everybody.
All right.